5.
Most excruciating event of the week, England, Slovakia, or Biden, Trump.
4.
He's worked extremely hard to try and become what now we can say is the French Giorgia Meloni.
3.
Yeah, Ed Davey, who's been windsurfing and Zumba classing.
2.
I think since he stopped wearing the waistcoat and making an effort, I think everything's gone to pot. He's now wearing sort of zip-up leisure wear.
1. We have liftoff.
Welcome once again to Planet Normal, the Telegraph podcast with Allison Pearson.
Hello?
And me, Liam Halligan. After a 6-week campaign, it's election day. The UK's last general election was back in 2019, of course, when the then brand new Brexit party led by Nigel Farage stood down candidates in hundreds of constituencies, helping the Tories smash Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, handing Boris Johnson an 80-seat Tory majority. 5 years and 3 prime ministers on, the situation could hardly be more different. Throughout this campaign, Keir Starmer's Labour Party has maintained its hefty lead over the Tories. Lots to discuss, Allison, although as this podcast is going out on polling day, election law requires that we can't refer to any current opinion polls and must be careful what we say. But it seems that on recent polling evidence, Labour's heading for a big majority, with the expected number of Tory seats falling after Nigel Farage, that man again, electrified an otherwise dull campaign by returning to frontline politics, standing in Clacton for his upstart party reform. And this time, he isn't standing his other candidates down. There are no legal limits on what we can say when it comes to the US, Allison, where Joe Biden bombed in the first leaders' debate before the presidential election in November. And Donald Trump's been handed immunity by the Supreme Court. And of course, there are vital elections in France this weekend too, where firebrand right-winger Marine Le Pen has a chance of securing significant power. But before we start Co-Pilot, let's talk England, football and the Euros. Ranked 5th in the world according to FIFA, England this week just about managed to beat Slovakia, ranked 45, getting through to the last 8 of the tournament after another somewhat hesitant performance. Why is it, Co-Pilot, that this England team seems to be firing on too few cylinders? Any advice from Velma for the beleaguered manager Gareth Southgate? No, of course.
Can he be taken out the back and disposed of? Oh, it was painful, Liam.
He's not your kind of man, really, Gareth Southgate. He's got the natty dress, but he's not your type, is he?
I think since he stopped wearing the waistcoat and making an effort, I think everything's gone to pot. He's now wearing zip-up leisure wear. Well, we watched it, but it was just it's so painful, isn't it, really? The team looked so slow. They could have been playing underwater. That's how bad it was. And it was just absolutely saved by a most magical goal, of course, by Jude Bellingham, and then Harry lumbered forward and knocked one in. But
one of our own. He's one of our own, Harry Kane.
They really don't deserve it, Liam. And if form is anything to go by, then Switzerland will mow them down. I should tell you this because it'll make you laugh. So my birthday's coming up, and this Saturday, a long time in advance, special tickets for Kiss Me Kate were purchased because I'm a big fan of musicals, and the look on himself's face when he discovered that the Kiss Me Kate matinee coincided with the England match was a sight to behold. So if anybody would like tickets for the Kiss Me Kate matinee on Saturday, we've got to watch the football. It does make a difference. I think it would have made a difference to the national mood, wouldn't it, if they were playing like Spain, who seemed to my amateur eyes to be playing an entirely different sort of game, really. Absolutely stunning. And we watched Turkey-Austria last night, and Turkey was really going for it. I don't know what it is about our lot, really. They seem to have only just been introduced on the field.
You sounded like Gary Lineker and Alan Shearer, hypercritical. Look, we're through to the last 8, and we're ranked 5th in the world, and we've got some of the best players. I agree with you. I'm being devil's advocate. It is incredibly... That didn't last very long, did it?
You are being devil's advocate. We'll talk about a beleaguered manager who doesn't seem to be able to get any goals. Brings us neatly to Rishi Sunak, who, of course, as you said, Liam, 6 weeks ago, stood in the pouring rain outside number 10, looking like a dripping wet, which, funnily enough, is the main complaint of millions of Conservative voters.
I love it when you come out with those pre-written lines off the top of your head.
Well, I'm slightly erring to the Joe Biden school of cognitive acuity. So I have to write everything down. But yeah, I think we have been saying on Planet Normal, have we not, for quite a long time, that there would be no such thing as a safe Tory seat. And I guess, Liam, the one really positive thing we can say at the moment is that had the campaign gone on 2 days longer, it would probably have been Ed Davey on a motorbike trying to get over 15 double-decker buses, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Ed Davey, who's been windsurfing and Zumba classing. And they're meant to be the sort of sensible part. Liberal Democrats, grown-up politics. It feels to me very different to 1997, which was the first campaign that I covered as a political reporter, when, of course, Tony Blair came to the fore and won a then seen as enormous 179 seat majority. When you think there are 650 MPs in Parliament, a majority of 179 is enormous. And yet opinion polling that we've seen over this campaign suggests that Starmer's party now could be on for an even bigger majority while securing far less actual votes even than Boris Johnson got during the 2019 general election, because of the way the vote's falling and the first past the post voting system, which I also think will come under scrutiny after this election. And whatever anyone says about his politics, good or bad, and his approach, his morals, whatever you think, Nigel Farage has electrified this campaign. And the fact that he is very likely, I would say, to become an MP in Clacton, even if it's just 1 or 2 reform seats in Parliament, I do think that will very much change the mood and make it a lot more difficult for the Tories after this election, their leadership contest, because I think the Tories that are going to get back to Parliament, a much diminished number, will be overwhelmingly what you described as those 2 true blue Tories in the Southern Shire seats that will have just squeaked past Lib Dem opposition in order to get back to Parliament, thinking then that the party's got to go back towards the centre. And there'll be fewer Tory MPs who manage to win against Labour or Reform in more kind of red wall seats, and who believe that the party needs to tack to the right. It's a desperately difficult conundrum for the Tories. And it's indicative of the realities of this campaign, that people have been talking for weeks about the Tory leadership post-election rather than the Tories' prospects in this election.
That's right. And of course, the Tory strategists, now there's an oxymoron for you. If I was still a secondary school teacher, I would be saying Tory strategists, that's an oxymoron. They did hope, didn't they, Liam? They thought that they could narrow the gap. They were on about 20 points back then. Labour was on 44. Bit of a squeeze now. Labour, most recent poll on Tuesday, was down to about 38. They do appear to have lost vote share, small amount of vote share, to Liberal Democrats and into the Greens. And who would have thought it, Liam, that on the day of the general election, and Rishi Sunak's best hope is to urge people to create a hung parliament. And I do think there is a brutal lesson here, a lesson which all politicians should learn. If you betray your base, if you pocket the votes of millions of people who expect you to deliver certain things, and you flagrantly do the opposite, then those people will become very angry and want revenge. Now, before we talk about, I think everyone agrees it's been a very sanitized, depressing campaign. The 2 leaders doing their best to avoid actual voters, lots of set pieces with party members and very biddable audiences. It's really lacked the fire and crackle of democracy, if you ask me. But I've got some Velma stats.
Go on, then.
I think this is interesting, Liam. This is a very volatile election. So we've got a lot of undecided. So 1 in 8 voters still undecided, and nearly 2/3 of those are women with an average age of 61. This is pretty much a good description of your co-pilot. Average age of 61, backed Brexit and voted for Boris in 2019.
Just to be clear, this evidence was collected some days ago.
That's correct, yes. So nearly 2/3 of the undecided are women, and most likely to be Conservative, and 2 in 5 of them voted for Boris in 2019. Now, it's been estimated that 36%, you're good at figures, co-pilot, aren't you? 36% of those 1 in 8 could change their minds at the last minute, compared to 27% in 2019. And given that I interviewed Nigel Farage in Frinton, as Nigel is a very expert reader of the political tea leaves, and he thought there were going to be a lot of squeaky 3-way marginals in which we will be down from those very large majorities that many Tory MPs got under Boris in 2019, very much a Brexit backing election that was. And we could be looking, Liam, tonight, obviously the podcast is going out on Thursday, but tonight in the small hours, we could be seeing a lot of very small majorities determining seats, particularly seats which have been Conservative for a very long time, including, this is no great feat of prediction, I would say this is going to be a night full of Portillo moments, which people will remember. We've talked about this before, haven't we? When Michael Portillo, I think he was then Defence Secretary, he was certainly tipped as a Conservative leader. He was unceremoniously turfed out. Was it Enfield Southgate, Liam?
Enfield Southgate in North London, indeed. The Portillo moment is British political slang for when a big beast is publicly beheaded. So when leading former cabinet ministers lose their seats, and they're not only dumped out of government, they're dumped out of Parliament at the same time.
I think we'll be into double figures with those Portillo moments. We're looking at no great loss here, some may say, but the first ever sitting Chancellor of the Exchequer potentially at risk, Jeremy Hunt in Godalming and Ash. Now, this is really interesting, Liam. Godalming and Ash is one of the 15 most affluent places in the UK. And if the Tories start losing those citadels, then, all bets are off. And even a squeaky chance that Rishi Sunak himself might be at risk in Richmond in North Yorkshire. How unbelievable would that be if a Conservative Prime Minister would face that kind of humiliation?
Well, it's all to play for, Allison. I do think this is going to be a seismic election, not in terms just of the result, but also the aftermath under many headings, even though the campaign itself, as you say, has been so luster. The way the two main party leaders, in huge contrast to Nigel Farage, of course, the two main party leaders, the way they do politics, you think they'd been coached by Gareth Southgate. But before we come on to our fabulous Planet Normal guest, let's just talk a little bit about the US. Since the last episode of Planet Normal, of course, we had that debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Before we read the runes of that, I must say, the way the debate was televised, you had like a split screen shot, didn't you? It was like a Celebrity Squares back in the old days with Arthur Mullard. Remember Arthur Mullard?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
What did Arthur Mullard do except appear on Celebrity Squares? And why was he a celebrity? Anyway, apologies to the family of the late, great Arthur Mullard. But you basically had Trump looking down the camera and Biden looking down the camera. They weren't using auto cue, and it's clear that off auto cue, of course, Joe Biden's State of the Union speech, in which he did quite well relatively recently, was on auto cue. But off auto cue, Biden finds it very difficult to put coherent sentences together. So as Joe Biden was talking, let's be fair, often stumbling his way, you had on the other side of the screen being beamed around America and the world, Donald Trump looking straight down the camera. And some of his, by Trump standards, he managed to appealingly underplay his shock. And I'm thinking we could maybe film Planet Normal like that. So when you're talking, exactly. I can do the facial expressions,
the kind of quizzical,
for the entertainment of the listeners and viewers. What do you think? Just an idea I put out there. We can talk about it with your agent if you want.
It's like, what did she just say? Be fair, Halligan. My sentences tend to have a destination, unlike Joe Biden's. Look, it was a close run thing. Most excruciating event of the week: England, Slovakia, or Biden, Trump. This is a bit of kind of his biography, really. But many years ago, when I was an undergraduate, I worked one summer in what was then called an asylum in Epsom and would be called something softer now. But I worked on the pre-senile dementia ward. So I spent an entire summer clearing up and wiping elderly people's bottoms and things. And it was an extraordinary experience, actually, one of the most vivid of my life, because it stays with you. When you talk to a retired headmaster who says, Allison, help me on with my pullover up to my elbows, and I'll remember it from there. And so all the ruins of people's minds. There was a guy actually who's a professor, Liam, and none of the staff could get through to him. And I found out he was a professor of languages. And I just had very, very schoolgirl French. And I started speaking to him in French. And it was like a light bulb came on in this dead brain. He literally started speaking French to me. But just that's a long-winded way of saying...
If there's anything that will rouse a Frenchman, it's someone mangling his wonderful language.
Exactly. It's like saying, mais non. Who is this dreadful woman saying, je m'appelle Allison? Anyway, but just to say that, of course, I can recognize symptoms of Parkinson's and pre-senile dementia and in the various syndrome. And to my eye, Biden has had those symptoms, the halting gait, the stiffness and so on, the blankness, the moments of blankness for quite some time. I think why this has got a bigger resonance, Liam, apart from the fact that the leader of the free world is clearly not in possession of all his marbles, is that we saw the entire Democratic establishment and the American liberal progressive media claiming for years that the people who said Joe Biden was suffering cognitive decline were terrible right-wing conspiracy theorists. There was nothing to this at all. He was smart as a whip. And I think this is something that we're seeing now across the world, which is this progressive liberal mindset. We're the good guys. And suddenly, lo and behold, in that debate, that fairy tale bumped big time into reality. It was actually too embarrassing to watch. And when you've got Donald Trump looking a lot more plausible than someone, you have to ask questions about it. But I think that this is a clash. Who are all these great liberal commentators, the New York Times, NBC, who have basically been conspiring, or are they conspiring to deceive the public? There have been arrogant collusion by the bien-pensant to keep their guy in place because they just think Joe's a good guy. He's got to be better than Trump. So it doesn't matter if he is mentally incapable and can barely function, as you said. I don't know if some Planet Normal listeners would have seen it, but a couple of days ago, Joe Biden did give a slightly better speech with the auto cue, and he delivered the words, and then he said, end of quote. At the end of this speech, end of quote. This is not someone who is functioning to the astonishingly high level that we would expect. And I think we are seeing this pattern now across the UK, and we're going to come to that in a moment, across France, where we see the majority of voters, so-called populists, or I would call them common sense realists, who are saying they want less immigration, they don't want gender ID nonsense, but they're told by their betters, or the so-called betters, that we live in a multicultural paradise where we can absorb 10 million more people in 20 years with no ill effects to the wider population. And I'm trying to say that it's the breakdown of the liberal centrist domination. It's now reality is coming up to punch it in the chops.
It's election season, not only in the UK, but across the Channel too, of course. So we're delighted to welcome on the rocket the hugely respected French journalist, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. Born in Paris, Anne-Elisabeth's written for leading publications across the world, and since 2007 has been a regular and much esteemed Telegraph columnist. Last Sunday, the first round of this French parliamentary election produced a big victory for the party of right-winger Marine Le Pen, which, with allies, won around 33% of the vote. A broad left-wing alliance came second, and President Emmanuel Macron, Allison's favourite, his centrists came third.
No more.
This follows earlier European elections in France, in which Le Pen's party also made big gains. But her chances of winning an outright majority in France's 577-seat National Assembly have been dented by the blocking tactics of her party's enemies. To explain everything ahead of this Sunday's second and final round of these parliamentary elections, to say nothing of French presidential elections scheduled for April 2027, do keep up. We're delighted to welcome Anne-Elizabeth to Planet Normal. Great to have you with us.
Great to be with you. Bonjour tout le monde.
Bonjour.
Anne-Elizabeth, it's so complicated. What's going on in France? Is Marine Le Pen going to become Prime Minister?
No, but she never wanted to be prime minister. She wants to be president in 2 years' time. And she appointed the president of her party. She was Jordan Bardella, who is the sort of boy wonder of the National Rally, who's 28, who's extremely poised and impressive. We're not sure there's something behind the facade, but the facade is shiny. And they've been leading a good campaign, which also is found its strengths because left and right, people detest Emmanuel Macron. And I'm said to be biased, but honestly, I've got friends running on both sides of the spectrum in France. And so I get through them some feedback on what's on the ground. And what's on the ground is we've had it with this man. He's an amateur. He looks down on us and he doesn't pay attention to what happens to us. He lives on a different planet, the abnormal planet, if you will. And they want him out. And I have one friend who is a Républicain and who decided to be in the split group that is supported by the National Rally. And he's got a sort of strong old-style socialist opponent. And he's a friend. He says, watch me on TV. And I watched his debate on regional news and talked about it. And I said, your adversary is pretty tough. And he says, when we're off screen, we go and have a drink. And then we both commiserate on the fact that the president is awful. That is not something I've seen in previous campaigns, and everywhere is different. All politics is local, but it's something which is making good and bad things possible on the French spectrum, I would say.
In the past, we've seen Le Pen doing better and better in this first round, haven't we? And then the other parties, this is almost unique, I think, in the French system of then coming together to block her. And I'm wondering now whether Macron's going to be able to do that. I read something that he was going to even get into bed with the far left. But something also I'd really like you to tell me. So is National Rally this far right racist party, or has it been detoxified enough to be acceptable to more French people? Or could we see it as a party that is thriving in reaction to a failure of multiculturalism? Sorry, that's a lot of questions, but I'm very interested in that.
That's many things at the same time. And actually, all of this is true to some degree. And it's a question of what the mix is like. Do they come from the far right? Absolutely. Do they have an unsavory past, an unsavory founder, who's the father of Marine Le Pen, still alive but barely? Yes. Have they got some pretty dicey views, which they try to tone down? And toning down, is that sincere or not? We do not know. They certainly have got finance money in the past from Russian banks. That was partly the fault of French banks, because in the French system, you have a ceiling of expenses you're allowed to make on a campaign. It makes for very different campaigns than in a country where you can spend at will, as long as you've got donors. And and also your campaign expenses are reimbursed by the state. If you pull more than 5%, there was never any question that in 2017 and in 2022, Marine Le Pen would pull more than 5%. Banks still did not want to give her a loan. She was faraged, if you will. And she went to Russian banks, who were, of course, delighted. And there have been talk around her. She's not terribly interested in foreign affairs, but there has been talk around her about how Russia is better than America, because one failing of the French right, which has existed since the 19th century, is this anti-Americanism, which is sort of Catholic Marxist view. It merges together. We're an old Catholic tradition country. We're also a fairly Marxist country. And the Marxism has not been abjured the way, for instance, the Social Democrats did in Germany. And the result is that there is this sort of hazy view about the international finance and the Americans, and it's unpleasant. It also means that say international financiers, and that's really a dog whistle for Jews. So all of this is being considered. She is aware of this. She's worked extremely hard to try and become what now we can say is the French Giorgia Meloni. Giorgia Meloni appeared in the background, and they all looked at her in Europe, on continental Europe, thinking, this is a dream. This woman is successful. She's intelligent. She's tough. She is an example, a continental European example of how we have to go about things. And she's pro-NATO, and she has looked at the budget of Italy, Italy's national debt. And so she's in good terms with the EU, because otherwise life will be difficult. And so she's a realist. And they're all trying to some degree to get the magic formula. The degree of sincerity, I would say in Marine Le Pen it is, and the generation of Bardella it is, because it's not their generation. They hate the far left, and therefore the entire sort of new toxic anti-Semitism of the far left is something that they really can't stand. Will there be a scandal at one stage of somebody that you find who's a national rally and says unpleasant things next to a live mic? You've seen that yesterday this happened to Giorgia Meloni, and she's now expelling the young people who did that, the sort of nostalgic for fascism in Italy. You have to be aware of what you're dealing with. Do the French believe that by and large she is detoxified? There have been many polls, and the answer is yes.
It certainly feels very different to me and Elizabeth from where I'm sitting on this side of the channel, particularly when you look at younger voters. I'm looking now at the evidence from the 2024 EU election, of course, in which Marine Le Pen's party made big gains. The 2019 European election, among 18 to 24-year-olds in France, 14% said that they were going to vote for Rassemblement National, Marine Le Pen's party. This year's European elections, it wasn't 14%, it was 39%. That's astonishing. How has RN managed to appeal to young French voters? Is it TikTok? Is it something else?
TikTok has something to do with it. Jordan Bardella has a lot to do with it. But there's a combination of many things, including the feeling that every movement where the people try to express unhappiness seem to be dismissed with a lot of techno talk. And for young people, Jordan Bardella, I think, has 7 million followers on TikTok. He's called a selfie candidate because he never refuses, and there's great young people's enthusiasm. But there's an attitude which is also older people relate to Marine Le Pen because they see her, after having doubts for a long time, as an almost motherly figure in some way, somebody who's pretty human. We know perfectly well, everybody knows that her father treated her badly. And eventually she kicked her father out of the party 6 years ago. And she was aware that both it was not good for the party, and also she was aware that she had to break that cord. And her father never thought he would become president, but he was a provocateur, as I said, with a pretty and unsavory origins. And when she was, quote unquote, betrayed by the niece she brought up, Marion Maréchal, the daughter of her sister, whom she mostly brought up, and who joined Éric Zemmour, the sort of far-right maverick, her reaction when she was asked about this was to say, look, I brought her up. Of course it hurts. There's nothing I can do about it. And all families have got problems. And that was exactly the kind of from the heart talk that Emmanuel Macron cannot do, even if he tries. There's a combination of that. There's a combination of the yellow vests who believe that they've not been listened to. The usual thing.
The Gilets jaunes protest movement.
Gilets jaunes, exactly.
Yeah.
And cost of living has gone up. Security has gone down. Anti-Semitism has gone up, and people being attacked in cities. Some parts of French immigration, most French immigrants are actually pretty well integrated, but you don't need many to really wreak havoc on entire areas. And all of this together is this toxic brew that makes it possible for the rally to go up.
I was campaigning, Elizabeth, with Nigel Farage.
I read your piece.
Yeah.
It's a great piece.
Thank you. And Messi.
What about my piece?
What about your piece?
Shame on me.
We were going to discuss my piece in this week's Planet Normal, Annalise, but somehow we didn't have time.
But just to say a point of similarity, I think with France is Nigel was getting a huge reaction from young people, particularly young men, and their figures, and he's very active on TikTok, as Jordan Bardella is. But we talked about immigration, people being broadly well integrated, but I've seen some pretty shocking figures this week about assaults and rapes, obviously rapes on women, in which the migrants were implicated. Do you think that Le Pen, if she is successful, will be cracking down on Islamists as she has, I was going to say, promised or threatened? And also, what might the repercussions be for dual nationals in France, which is a concern, I think?
Many things here to unpack, to use the sort of strange new expression. But first of all, we don't need new laws. If only laws were being applied, that would be a difference. But to apply the laws, you need several things that France has been slowly getting late about, which is we need to build more jails. We need to find people who will be jail guards. There's no French tradition of privately run jails. I don't think that would pass muster in this country. We need a change in with some activist judges. But every time I've actually been into a courthouse to see everyday small cases, I was impressed by the work of the judges. They don't like sending people to jail because nobody does. So there's a combination of not offending largely left-leaning, but by and large very professional judges and magistrates in France. And they're all civil servants, by the way. So the Minister of Justice has got their hands full on this one. You've got this. You've got Islamism, which is a different thing. And Islamism, it's a question of kicking out agents of Islamism, considering that we still will have a problem because the expert Florence Bergeau-Blaclair, who's a quite remarkable woman who now has written about the Muslim Brotherhood in France, she estimates that there are more than 100,000. And this is a woman who's living under police protection day and night. So we've got several things. We've also got kids whose parents have not paid much attention to their schooling and who basically, they can't be tamed. So there's also, how do you deal with this within an education system which is largely state and which, same thing, is rather left-leaning. They're all civil servants, but they also are trying their best in difficult conditions. For the past 25 years, and that has been denounced many times, they were not protected by their ministry. They were not protected by the minister. They were not protected by their administration. They were not protected by the regional heads of national education systems. And all of this meant that teachers, first, they resigned, which means that we haven't got enough good teachers or indeed teachers. And soon they knew that their lives were in danger. And so this unchecked propaganda, which is vile anti-Semitism that comes from all propaganda in the Middle East. And when I say all propaganda, many Nazis found refuge in places like Syria and Egypt in the 50s and 60s and were used by Nasser mostly, but also the father of Assad, to essentially reproduce what they had done for the Nazi regime. So that if you looked at caricatures in Arab papers in the 70s and 60s, and they exist, there are records of those, they are the German caricatures of the 30s, because why reinvent the wheel? And all of this has metastasized with the Islamists taking over from the semi-secular regimes in the Arab world and not being aware of the nature of Arab anti-Semitism is, you're not seeing the entire question. You're seeing half the question. The result is also essentially unruliness and lack of means to take care of young people. There are lots of parents in immigration who come from immigration who were born in foreign countries, whose kids are born in France, and they work hard so that they can send their kids to private schools, which are much cheaper in France because they're subsidized, and who are not like that. But if you remember William Bratton, the police chief who worked with Rudy Giuliani in the 90s to change the state of New York, he said, you only need 200 or 300 people to destroy the peace in a 100,000 neighborhood. He was talking about Queens.
There's so much to ask you, Anne-Elizabeth, and we're running out of time. We want to hear, for instance, what you actually think will happen on Sunday, whether or not those Macron party candidates will stand down, where they look as if they're going to be coming third. But I have to ask you just before that, what does this mean, whatever happens on Sunday, for France and the EU? What does this mean for France's public finances, given that the bond markets seem pretty unenthusiastic about the prospect of a Le Pen surge?
Well, we have 3 trillion euro debt, and I will not blame Macron alone for that, because many presidents, including Jacques Chirac, dug that hole. It's a very big hole. They're going to raise interest rates. That's what they're going to do. We already have a differential, a spread between the interest rates in France. So I think right now it's something like I think it's 3.5%, but it's around 3.5 when the Germans borrow at 2.4, that sort of thing.
The interest rate should be roughly the same in a single currency area, but the markets are saying
Shouldn't it?
they're far less willing to buy French government debt than German government debt now because of the prospect of a big spending government.
Yes, and by and large, it doesn't mean that France is going to go bankrupt. It's a large country, it does produce stuff. But every single National Assembly, whichever stripe it comes out as, will have to either raise taxes, and the left would do it, or cut expenditure, which means that lots of people are going to have a not quite so good life as they would have. And so we are facing unpleasant times because that's the only way. Or we still go ahead and do what we've been doing for 14 years, but it doesn't help. So that's a problem. I would imagine that everyone except the hard left, and I almost do not believe that they will be in power. I don't think it works that way because they polled less than 10%. They polled 9.9% at the European elections. But the others have signed. I'm sorry if this becomes complicated. There's an alliance between all left-wing parties. So you've got La France Insoumise, France Unbowed, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who are Corbynites except worse. And then you've got a tiny communist party of less than 2% of the vote overall, and their president has just lost the election in the first round. You've got the Socialist Party, which is a strange mishmash of pro-European and old-style apparatchiks, but they're not bad people. And we've got the Greens, and French Greens have been falling down like Greens all over Europe because of net zero, and they have less power. And their concern is really a specialist concern. They have signed up to a manifesto, which is bonkers, which is the technical term, with inheritance tax at 100%, so that people essentially, the inheritance is capped, and then everything is taken by the state. People who rent out to renters have no rights. Whoever cannot pay their rent can stay on. A number of the minimum wage is raised 30%. Many different sort of measures, which are absolutely crazy. I wrote a piece about this in the Telegraph about, 10 days ago or something, about the guillotine, which is the editors thinking that is going to bring people to read the piece. But it is very true that it's a crazy platform. So that Mélenchon wants to apply it. Half the Socialist Party signed on this because it was that or a nation separately. But that will worry the markets much more than Marine Le Pen. But what will worry the markets is that if Le Pen gets almost a majority, a full majority or close to the majority, there will be riots. And that's also something that worries everyone.
Just finally from me, Elizabeth, that we've got the Olympics coming up in Paris. And I know it was deemed to be quite controversial that they put a lot of the sites for the games in quite centrally in Paris rather than in a more distant outside suburban area where things could be more controlled. If Le Pen and her exciting, I was going to say toy boy, but that's rude. The charming but strangely adjacent 28-year-old Jordan Bardello.
Look, toy boy is only rude in a world of woke, and this is a world away from woke. It's planet normal. Far away, co-pilot. As the token man on this podcast, I'm okay with toy boy. Okay,
I'm not going to embarrass one of France's leading commentators by asking her what the nature of the relationship is.
He is very charming. Let's put it that way.
He does. Yes, he's quite male model. Walked out of a very high-end men's clothing shop, isn't he?
He works at it.
He does work.
Imagine if two blokes talked about a female politician like this.
All right, you just told us we could.
We're making.
Do you think there's a prospect that the Olympics could be disrupted by riots?
It's possible. It is possible. It is going to be a nightmare to secure.
Yeah.
I live myself in what is known as a red zone, which means that I can walk home, but if I want to have a taxi taking me home, I need to have a QR code, which I haven't been able to get from the website of the games, even though it's supposed to work. This is so annoying. It is possible we are going to have a different Home Secretary on the 9th. All of this is not helping because the changes in the civil service, and again, the police is the civil service, and it depends from the ministry, it doesn't depend from the city of Paris. All of this is going to have to be managed without prior warning by the people who end up being the ministers of several different parties, the way it looks. Yes, if I'm Monsieur le Terroriste, I would think, this is a great opportunity.
Well, the Olympics start on Friday, the 26th of July, so there'll be a bit of a cooling off period after the French election on Sunday. Great to have you with us, Anne-Elizabeth Moutet, as ever. Brilliant analysis. And your French ain't bad either, I have to say.
Not quite as good as Liam's, but you hang in there. You'll get there eventually.
The next one will be in French. Podcast.
If you work hard, we can have you ready for A-level this time next year.
Merci beaucoup.
Bientôt. Oh,
À
bye.
bientôt.
Bye.
Bye.
Now on to our listener emails. Your message is sent to planetnormal@telegraph.co.uk. Please keep them coming. We love to read your thoughts and learn so much from you, the citizens of Planet Normal.
Now, no national occasion would be complete without a rhyming masterpiece from Planet Normal's resident bard, Bob. Dear Planet Normal, says Bob, as I'm sure you are aware, while a general election is taking place, broadcasters are forbidden from discussing politics, and they are instead compelled by law to fill the time by reading out dreadful poetry. I have therefore written something which I hope complies with these regulations. Thanks again, says Bob, for Planet Normal, the podcast that always gets my vote. Boom, boom. This is Election Blues, with apologies to W.H. Auden.
Hooray!
Stop all the polls, no discussion of them, no more politics till 10 p.m. For men and women across the nation are making their way to the polling station. How many will vote? We have yet to see. Will Boris remember his photo ID? Silence the pundits with their balls of crystal and spare a thought for Brenda from Bristol. From the north to the south.
Another one.
Another one. From the north to the south and the east to the west. No more stunts, no more gaffes. Let the candidates rest. And let correspondents who report for us wave a fond farewell to the battle bus. Politicians with leaflets shall knock no more, so it's safe once again to answer your door. But they'll be back on our screens tonight at 10, so let poor old John Curtis get some rest before then. Brilliant, Bob.
Wow. It's longer than his normal offering, if I may say something so bold.
Yes, I'm not going to hesitate which poetic form it is. Let's just call it a lyric.
Is there a bit of iambic pentameter in there?
Iambic pentameter going on there, if not triameter, I think, going on.
Brilliant. Bob, you've surpassed yourself yet again.
And James says, if Labour wins as anticipated, then our ears will be assaulted by the worst speaking voices from the front bench ever heard. Not one of them speaks melodiously. Earplugs at the ready. That was a hazard I hadn't actually anticipated, Liam.
What a lack of melodious speaking.
Tory scum. Tory scum.
Here's another one, Allison, from Rachel. I listened to Emily's email in your 13th of June episode, writes Rachel, the Nigel Farage one, and was moved by her clear distress at the thought of her wonderful dyslexic 8-year-old daughter having to move back into the state school system, which has already been shown not to work for her. I wondered if you could let Emily know that there is another option, home education. My son's 16, is likely autistic and dyslexic. I say likely as being home educators, we've just adjusted our learning methods to suit him, to find the way that he learns best, so I've never felt the need to seek a formal diagnosis. That may change as he begins his A-levels at sixth form in September. Home education is often a great option for those who don't fit into the school system. Please don't despair, Emily. There is another way. Thank you so much, Rachel. What a lovely public-spirited email there from Rachel. From one parent to another parent she doesn't know, but who clearly she cares about.
And that is as a direct result of this plan to put 20% VAT, Liam, on private schools. And one thing I think that people perhaps aren't aware of, and I was quite shocked the other day, was to realise that over 40% of special educational needs children are in private schools. So that's going to present a conundrum, isn't it, for Labour? This is from Eve. Eve was not impressed with a tactical guide to helping the Tories win, which she saw in a newspaper. Can we get a tactical guide to finding an NHS dentist, please? Can we get a tactical guide to getting timely surgery for serious illness to get through to a GP? In fact, any guide, says Eve, to make a political party actually do as they promise during election campaigns. Very good.
And finally, co-pilot, this is from Thomas, and this refers to a column in the Telegraph written by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Suella Braverman, says Thomas, is the only Conservative who's come out and owned up to the fact that the Tories have brought this on themselves and opened the door for Labour to walk in. All the rest try to blame Reform, ignoring the fact they sat on their hands for the last 14 years. And on that bombshell, that's it from Planet Normal as we speed away for another week. As we leave our sanctuary of sweet reason, our flying refuge of reason views, email of the week, the co-pilot.
It's going to be Rachel for her lovely, very, very generous advice to Emily, sharing what can happen with how you can help dyslexic children in what is going to be a pretty tumultuous period.
So, well done, Rachel. Lovely choice, Allison. Send us, Rachel, an email to planetnormal@telegraph.co.uk. Put in the subject heading of that email mug winner with your postal address. We will send you a Planet Normal mug.
If you enjoy Planet Normal, please leave us a rating and a review on Spotify, the podcast app, or wherever you listen to this podcast. And one final thought, co-pilot, should the election turn out in a certain way, which we cannot predict, there will be a naughty step in the House of Commons, which could contain George Galloway, Nigel Farage, and Jeremy Corbyn. Who says it's not going to be entertaining?
And as we speed away from our beloved Planet Normal and the matters of planet Earth comes back into view, thanks as ever to our producers, Isabel Bouchard, Elliot Lampitt, Cass Ho, Louisa Wells. Stay safe and in touch with us and with each other. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.